There are moments in life when we realize something important. Change doesn't always come from waiting for the right system, the right answer, or the right time. Sometimes it comes from deciding to step in and be the person who makes a difference. That's why this line from the Legacy Project stopped me in my tracks. The line is, every student deserves someone in their corner. Because that belief doesn't just describe a problem, it describes a choice. And today, I'm so stoked to be sitting down with the founder of the Legacy Project, Mr. Eugene Legenhole. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. That's very good.
Gosh, look at
Usually a
me.
problem with that last name, so that was awesome.
I love it.
It's great to be here
Uh,
with you, Jenna. I'm super excited for today.
Oh my gosh, I am so stoked. And we are going to talk about what happens when someone sees a need and decides to respond. When advocacy becomes action and when being in someone's corner turns into a mission. As you listen to this episode, I hope you'll sit with this question. What change have you felt called to make? And who might need you in their corner right now? Welcome to the Aggressive Optimism podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Edwards, and this podcast is all about building a life you actually want by telling the truth about where you are, getting clear about where you want to go, and taking intentional steps forward even when it feels hard. Today's conversation is a powerful example of what that looks like in action. Oh my gosh. Eugene, thank you so much for being here. I'm like so grateful for this conversation and super, super excited to share your story with our audience. I want to slow things down a little bit before we dive into the massive impact the Legacy Project is making on myself personally too, and I'll get into that as
Mhm.
well. But you know, I like to frame things around the AIM method, right? So the first thing in that is acknowledging where you are. So I'd love to take a minute to talk to you about what was happening in your life that made you start paying attention to this issue, the issue of like kids not having an advocate. What was happening? What were you seeing in that moment? And when did you realize, like, I can't unsee this anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I was going back 10 years ago when I was first started going into the middle schools. It was working with kids and working with students at Lehman Middle School, and really seeing a lot of students that didn't have anybody in their life. Like I grew up, in a supportive family, and I had a mom and dad that cared about what I was doing each day, and really seeing that a lot of these students were coming to school. Not having that support system. I shared the story, with meeting that little girl, and she was coming into school every day, falling asleep, and I was just assuming as a parent she was staying up too late watching YouTube or video games or whatever, and so I finally just went up to her and I said, hey, why are you so exhausted? And I think it was really at that point that really led me to Legacy, and starting Legacy was when she looked up and she said, I have a younger brother and sister, and my mom and dad are, we're unfortunately drug addicts, and we're not coming home, for days at a time. And, she was raising her younger siblings, making sure they got up and fed and off to school. And it was really at that point that my heart was broken for making sure that, every student that we come in contact with knows that there's a caring adult that wants to give them hope and encouragement and a light that they might not have had otherwise.
It's such a powerful story, and I'm so glad you shared it with our audience because you had shared it with me earlier. I'm curious about two things regarding that story. One, I think it's so important to just acknowledge for a second that you wouldn't have had that insight had you not been brave enough to ask.
Yeah.
And I feel like as
Hmm.
adults, we tend to think we have to have it all figured out. And so it's almost like a moment of humility in a way, right? Like humbling yourself enough to be like, I don't know everything, and clearly something is wrong, and I need to figure out what it is, and then being brave enough to ask a child. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that's that's a great point, because I think a lot of times we as adults, we just assume things.
Yep.
We just assume, like I said, I just figured she was up watching video games, and it's like you said, when we take the time to just say, hey, you know what, these students do have opinions, even though they're young, even though they're just getting into, moving into this next adult phase of their life, they still have opinions, they still have thoughts and ideas, and yeah, we as adults need to listen to them and hear their hearts and what they're concerned about, and react and respond to that, for sure.
Definitely. And I think it's also important for those of us who are in our adult years to kind of put ourselves back in those situations in a way. Because, like, I grew up with some turmoil in my childhood as well. And so, like, people would assume, just like you mentioned, she's just watching YouTube or whatever. But, like, these kids are going through some stuff a lot of times, and we can't always frame it around what our experience is with the world. And I love that you did that. And so my next question is, what do you think was the hardest thing for you to acknowledge in that moment? And what, like, I guess basically you're saying this experience sparked the Legacy Project mission, right? So I'm curious about, like, what was the hardest thing in that moment for you to acknowledge? And then what was the Legacy Project coming out of it? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I think the answer to that would be, I grew up in a small town, and we didn't see a lot of that as I was growing up in the schools and in the,
a lot of what? I'm sorry, Eugene. I don't mean to interrupt you.
Just in a lot of that brokenness, that hopelessness, maybe, so that really was what it was like. The first time, it's like, wow, there's students, there's kids that are living these lives, coming to school, trying to learn, trying to engage, and we really don't have any idea what's going on at home, and what their home life is, and what their support system is like, and we need to, that was it. It's like, Legacy needs to start so we can give them some kind of a hope, some kind of support, that they may never receive if we don't take the time to do that.
That's beautiful. And when you decided to start this, what was the hardest, what was the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome just to start?
Yeah, I would say that probably the biggest obstacle was just figuring out what was going to work so that we could meet the most kids. We started it as like an after-school program, and found out that the kids that were staying after school had parents that cared enough, obviously, to pick them up and get them there. But we were missing this whole demographic of kids that never would have the opportunity, and so that's kind of why our niche is like going in at lunchtime, and we meet the kids during their lunch hour. That way, our motto is any student can be in our program and be part of what we're trying to do. And so that was probably the biggest lesson that we learned starting out, was how do we impact the most kids in the best way, and that was kind of the lunchtime programs that we do.
Amazing. And when you had that realization, what did you have to acknowledge? Like, explain the scenario where you realized, wait, the kids that we're actually helping with our after school program aren't necessarily the kids that need our program the most. And then what did you do? Because that's a moment I think a lot of us in adulthood struggle with as well, is like, we have this idea and we go about it without being willing to adjust.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the thing. It was just like, either inside the church world or whatever, after school programming was just kind of the way that it was done, and fit for a lot of needs. And it was, a lot of it was just like an internal realization that, hey, this isn't going to work, and it's maybe going to take a little more sacrifice and a little more work, but this is the best platform to be able to make the biggest impact. And so it was, not getting caught up in the scenario of, hey, this always works, so let's continue to do it. But it's a willingness to say, step back and say, that isn't working. What's a different way that we can go about this? And it might, like I said, might take a little more sacrifice and a little more gumption, but this is the best way to reach the kids.
Amazing. And as we move into the next segment, which is identify where you want to go, I have a question for
Okay.
you. If you could give the listeners one piece of advice about acknowledging where they are right now, especially when something feels wrong or unfinished and like just doesn't feel 100% good, for lack of a better word, what would that be?
Um, I was thinking about that, and I think it's like if you have a mission, it's like stay focused on that mission, and don't let, I think that was the thing that we've learned along the way with the Legacy Project. You get a lot of voices telling you what you should do and what's the best way to go. And I think if you have something in your heart that you're focused on, stay on mission for that. Know what your mission is, and then avoid just mission drift, we call it, because you hear this, and this is maybe a way to get funding, because we are a nonprofit. So maybe they do this for funding or this for funding, and then pretty soon you're drifting off of your mission, and you're not really making an impact like you should be.
I love that advice so much. And it's actually the perfect segue into the next section, which is identifying where you want to go. And I have this conversation a lot about what their actual goal is. And I mean, I've experienced this myself, and I call it opinion overload. I love that you have a different term for it. But like, oftentimes the mission or the goal or where you actually want to go with your life is more of a feeling, and it oftentimes we identify it as like, I'm going to go make this movie, right? Or I'm going to build this nonprofit, when the actual like where you want to go is, I want to help as many kids as I can. Right. I want to, share this story. I want to make a positive impact. Like, it's a bigger thing, right, that can be achieved in a million different ways. And so I think when we identify where we want to go, it's really important to identify the actual place we want to go, not necessarily the how we want to like achieve that.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so I would love to hear from you. Was there any time when you were building this amazing program where you realized like, oh wait, what I've identified is actually not the place I want this to go?
That's a good question. We've tried different things, and I think the lesson that I think I've learned and we've learned here at Legacy is not every path is going to get you to where you go, and I think that's what you're trying to say. There has to be this willingness to say, that doesn't work, and the humility to say, you know what, we need to try a different venue. Like I said, the big thing was the after school thing. We've tried to do some other things that haven't worked, and it's the ability to realize that, to pivot, and to say, let's try something else.
Right, because you could have identified your mission as, we're creating an after-school program, when in reality your mission is, we want to impact kids.
We want to make it so every student has the ability to meet with a caring adult is what we say, and the best way to do that is not always what you think the norm is.
Isn't that so fascinating? Yeah, I would never have thought, wait, we need to do it at lunch because these kids are here.
Yeah.
It's like the perfect example of meet them where they are.
Right. Yeah.
And I also think it takes such a strong foundation and like such a healthy ego to be like, I'm okay with trying and then quote unquote failing, because it's not a failure as long as I reach as many kids as possible. Like, right, how we go about doing that is important, because there is going to be a way to reach the most kids, but how we get to the right path is not the most important thing. And I think it feels like failure to a lot of people. How did you stick with your vision and like know exactly how to kind of like be okay with those quote unquote failures?
Yeah, I think another big piece of progressing through whatever it is that you're going to go pursue is getting the right people around you, and not feeling like, hey, I know it all, and that I'm going to push this vision forward, but being open to getting people that you trust that are going to give you that advice to help you stay on mission, help you stay focused, and I think that not to toot my own horn, but I feel like that I realize what my weaknesses are, maybe what my strengths aren't or are, and then if I don't have a strength in that area, then it's gathering people around me that are going to help me stay focused on that mission and avoid getting off the path per se of what we're trying to accomplish.
Oh my gosh, I love that you said that, because this is like a point I make constantly to filmmakers, especially because it's such a collaborative art, right? And I think having a nonprofit is a similar situation, right? You can't do it by yourself.
No.
It's literally impossible to do this type of project by yourself. And so one of the things that I always talk to my filmmakers about, if I'm going to go on and produce a project, is like, what is the actual goal?
Right.
And then whenever we have those moments where we're like, well, we tried it this way, but it's not really working, we get to say, like, here's our goal, guys. This has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with you. It only has to do with the project and the goal of the project. And I think what you're saying is very similar. Like, you have to know, for me, I am the worst at post-production. Please do not ask me to edit something. And so I need to be more than willing to bring in somebody who's good at it.
Yeah.
And be okay with it and be like, I don't know anything. Tell me what you need.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, my vision was like an after school program. And then I met Jen Warner, who's now our executive director. And it was like her idea of saying, let's give this a try at school. And it's like, I'm like you said, your pride kind of gets in the way at the beginning. It's like, no, I wanted this to be an after school program, but you have to kind of put that away and what's the best avenue that we're going to be able to make the biggest impact, and be okay with making that pivot.
And that's such a great segue into the advice section for identifying, like, when you have those moments where your ego gets in the way. And I mean, I'm a big believer, like, there is healthy ego and there's not healthy ego, and it's just a process, right? And so when your ego stops you from actually achieving your goal, how do you, like, bring it back down, ground yourself, and bring your mindset back to what's best for the project?
Again, it's probably, everything that we do is centered around mentorship. It's about, sending adults in and mentoring students. And I think for me, it's having mentors in my life. It's having trusted people in my life that aren't necessarily, on staff at Legacy, but are willing to say, hey, Eugene, you need to put your pride aside. You need to put your ego aside, because this isn't working, and make sure that you're listening to wise counsel around you. And I think that's huge for all of us, either as a student that's struggling, or even as us as adults that are trying to make a path, or make choices. We need to have those other caring adults, even in our lives at our age, that are willing to hold us accountable, willing to say, hey, you know what, I think you're really heading down the wrong direction here. And I've had that. And so that's been like a blessing for me in this process over the 10 years, for sure.
That's incredible. And so for anybody listening who is just getting started on maybe building a nonprofit or whatever their project is, how do you advise they go about finding those mentors?
For me, it's just finding people that I know aren't just going to be, they're usually pretty close friends. I'm not saying that, but they're not just going to be yes people. They're not going to just agree with me, but they're going to push back when they need to push back. And I think it's important for us to find, those 2 or 3 people in our lives that can, speak truth, even though it might sting a little bit, and not just be people that say, oh yeah, you're doing great, Eugene, just keep going. Because, then it's like, how do we know if we're getting off that path if we don't have those people? So, I have like 2 or 3 people in my life that I know, they're going to look at to listen to me, and then they're going to say, you know what, I think you're a little off on your thinking here. And I think that's huge for us to have that in our lives.
I agree wholeheartedly. And so let's do the general piece of advice for the identify section. So if you could give the listener one piece of advice about identifying where they want to go, especially when the path isn't clear, what would it be?
Um, like I said, stay focused on the mission would be one. I think the other thing is, and this is the kind of the hard part for me, because you always want to look at the end goal and the big win, and sometimes you miss so many of the little wins along the way. So it's like, look for the little wins along the way, the little places that you're impacting kids and the changes that you're making, and that would be the big thing. Is don't always look for that not end goal, but that big piece that you think's coming. Look for all the little things that you're impacting along the way.
Oh my God, I love that so much. It's so important, especially for people who are ambitious, right?
Yeah, because we eventually want to, if we don't hit that big mark, then all of a sudden we're failures, and we miss all the little wins all along the way, and that's my personality. It's like, oh man, we're not moving fast enough, we're not impacting enough kids, we're not in enough schools, and then you miss all these little stories and these little wins that are happening on a daily basis in our program.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I've been mentoring now with Legacy. I can't even tell you how many little moments that have made such a huge impact on me, not to mention the students,
right.
Like just those moments where you get to remind them that they have more autonomy than they think. Or like, I remember there was this one girl in my group who was talking about bullying. And she's like, nobody will do anything. And I just looked at her and I'm like, but you did.
Yeah.
And there was this light bulb moment of like, oh, wait, I am somebody who can do the thing. And it was a beautiful moment. And I've had so many of them. So I'm just going to take a second here to just acknowledge, Eugene. What you're doing is not only impacting these kids, it is impacting the adults in the room as well, and the entire community. It's just such a beautiful thing. So thank you. And for the listeners, I'll get back on track. But I also think like it is so important to acknowledge those little moments. I feel like comparison is poison, right? And so anybody who's listening to this podcast, like remember, Eugene started this project how many years ago now, Eugene?
10 years. 10 years.
10 years.
You've been a 501c3, yep.
Right? But 10 years that you've been a 501c3. And when we had our conversation, we went out to coffee, y'all. It was so fun. When we had our coffee date, it was like you were telling me it was multiple months, if not years, before you actually became a 501c3.
Yeah, it was 2 years. 2 years prior that I invested in this before we actually got to the point of becoming a 501c3. Yeah.
Yeah, and see, so it's 12 years in the making, and I'm saying that because like when you said, you always want to look at the big goal, and you forget to look at the little things, it reminded me of this conversation I was having with my baby sister on the phone. And I mean, she's my baby sister. She's an adult now, obviously.
Always be your baby sister, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember talking to her about, I had just moved to Ohio from Los Angeles. Los Angeles had been my like dream since I was 3 years old. And I got to be a resident and in the entertainment industry and living like literally, you guys, living my dream for 25 years. And then some personal things happened that brought me back to Ohio, which is where my husband's from and his family is here. And so we made the choice to move back. And I remember talking to my sister and just being like, I feel like I failed.
Yeah.
And she's like, what are you talking about? And then she like started listing all of these things that she thought was a big deal, right? Like all these things, been on television, I wrote a book, like all the things. But one of my best friends had just won an Emmy.
Okay.
And so I was like, yeah, but I don't have an Emmy. And she's like, well, if that's your comparison, like, you're going to be in serious trouble for the rest of your life because
Right.
most people don't have an Emmy, right? And
Yeah.
it was this moment of like exactly what you're saying where you have these big dreams, but like that's not life.
Right.
And we have to really take a step back and be like, what are the quote unquote smaller moments that make life rich? And I just love that you brought that up and allowed me to tell this ridiculous story about comparing myself to my Emmy winning friend.
I mean, we do that. Yeah, I mean, we do that in the nonprofit world or even in the business world. It's like, look at them, and it's like just stay in your own lane, run at your own pace, and because
Yeah,
comparison is a dangerous thing when you start getting into that. Yeah.
it really is, which is, again, Eugene, you're so good at this. You're like perfectly segueing into each segment. So thank you for that. So the next segment is move with intention. So I really want to talk about the action that you had to take because I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. And so what was the first real step that you took towards making this vision happen?
I would say it's probably, after being, in the schools for a couple of years, realizing that I couldn't do this on my own. So it was kind of a twofold thing. I had to start a nonprofit because I was working two jobs in order to volunteer, and get this started. So like, all right, there has to be a way where I have to start figuring out how to fund this. So it was, getting the 501c3 and going through all the work to get that. And,
Which is quite a bit of work. Like it's no small feat to get a 501c3. I
No,
just
go
have
ahead.
to tell everybody this because I wrote it down. It was one of like three things I wrote down when I was having our coffee date, and it made me so happy. It was like no money, no mission.
Yeah.
And I think so many people look at those like heart-led missions as non-paying. But the reality is, like, I remember when I decided to move to Los Angeles and be an actor, my mom and dad both looking at me and going, there is truth to the term starving artist. They're like, please do not do that.
Right.
And then we had a conversation about the business side of missions and art and creating something out of nothing. And I think when you said no money, no mission, it reminded me of that conversation. Like, we cannot impact the amount of people that we want to impact in the world if we are poor and broke and have no money.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Yeah. You can have all
And
the heart you want, but yeah.
exactly, you still like, I wish we could pay rent and mortgages based on our heart's purity.
Right. Yep. Exactly. I wish that a lot of times when I was working two jobs to do this. Yeah.
And so I want to take a step back because I think something you said was really important and I'd like to highlight it, which was you had two jobs just so you could do this job that
Yeah.
your heart was leading you towards. And so what did that look like in real time? Because I think a lot of people, if they have this amazing idea, think like, oh, somebody's going to sponsor me right away.
Yeah.
And I wish that were true as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You're working with kids. Shouldn't they just throw money at me?
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's a lot of what keeps people from going after their goals or their passions is there's sacrifice. Like you said, it doesn't, people aren't just throwing money at our feet and saying, hey, you're doing great things. Here's $1 million. And so, for me,
Oh my
it was
God, that
like,
would be the greatest day ever.
yeah, that'd be great. I'm looking for that person that wants to give $1 million, but
I know,
it's
right?
like, yeah, you have to realize that, yeah, I'm going to need to work two jobs in order to get this launched, but like you said, with working along the way to say, okay, this isn't sustainable, me working two jobs and doing this. So we got to figure out a way also to fund this. And, especially in the nonprofit world, people aren't going to fund you until they see that you're established and you're actually making a difference. And so for us, it took 3 or 4 years for us to get to that point where funders were saying, okay, this is legit. Now,
What do you think shifted that? Like, I feel like, was it something internally amongst the team that made you feel like you were qualified to go out and ask for money from investors? Was it like, what was that moment? What was that tipping point?
Um, yeah, I mean, the tipping point for us, um, unfortunately, was that there was a suicide um, um, whatever, I don't know what the verbiage is, but there was multiple suicides that were happening at one specific school, near us, and I think at that point it was like the schools realized, hey, we need some help in here. Most schools only have two or three counselors. They can't see every student and hear all the things that are going on, and so for them it was like, man, Legacy is showing up at just the right time to be able to bring those volunteer adults into the schools, meet with the kids, be another voice. So if they're hearing something, yeah, we're not counselors by any means, but we are eyes and ears to say, oh, this student's struggling, we need to make sure that they're getting help where they might not have ever talked to a counselor or talked to somebody that could help them. So I think that was probably, it's unfortunate, but that was really where the school said, you know what, we can't do this on our own anymore. And then they started reaching out to us, and then the funders in the same way were saying, okay, we see this as a potential way to combat some of this suicides that are happening, is just to get some more eyes and ears into the school. So that was really like the tipping point for Legacy, and kind of, I don't know, got us
But
going.
I think it's interesting that you're saying this, though, because I really want to remind people, how many years had you been doing this on your own and then as a 501c3 before that tipping point happened?
Yeah, it was 2 years of just me in a school, and then it was probably 4 years into us having our 501c3, where it started to shift and it started to become something sustainable, where we could start to, I could start to hire some more help for what I was trying to do, and grew from there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the listeners to know, like, oftentimes we see, especially with social media, we see the like highlights reel, right?
Hmm.
And we
Yeah.
very rarely get to peel back the curtain on like all of the moments of fear and doubt and resistance that were showing up for the people building the thing. And then we think like, oh, something horrible is happening and I should just start this thing. But what I'm hearing from you, Eugene, and what I've seen in my experience is like, you have to start the thing when you are pulled to start the
Yeah.
thing, and
Yeah.
then you can be there as a solution or a tool, or fill in the blank on the word that you choose, to help when the situation comes up. But I don't think we should be approaching these types of things when like it's not a reactionary
Yeah, that's a great, yeah, because
project.
we see that all the time in the nonprofit world, is people will see something, they'll react to it, and they'll say, oh, I'm going to start that. And then, 3 months later, when they find out the sacrifice and the fact that people aren't going to just throw money at them, then they lose that passion. Where, I really, what we try to do is get people with a passion for it, just like yourself. I have a passion for students, so I'm going to volunteer my time to mentor. I don't have to start a nonprofit to do this. I can join Eugene and his team at Legacy and be on mission with them, with a passion that I have to pour into the lives of these kids.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so fascinating you just said that, because when I first moved to Los Angeles, I was in this project that was about animal rescue. And it was a wonderful project. But the thing that I noticed, because we were shooting the film at actual rescue events, animal rescue events,
Yeah.
there was like hundreds of rescue organizations. And I would just stand there and be like, why are you not teaming up?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I say that to say to our listeners, if you're pulled in a certain direction to help and your career maybe doesn't align with that, like your career goals,
Right.
volunteer.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, it's not up to you to do all the things. Again, we go back to the very beginning of this
Yeah.
conversation. We
Hmm.
cannot make a difference alone.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's impossible. And
Yeah.
I am a very firm believer that almost everything is possible. That is the one impossible I have come to realize. Like, we cannot do this alone.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, yeah, it's just like with Legacy. I mean, we have over 400 adult volunteers that are giving their time to impact these kids. You know, we have a staff of 8 or 9 of us. We couldn't make the impact without, like you said, people that, have the time, have the capacity, have the passion to volunteer, and then they're just giving of that time
yeah.
to the mission.
I mean, and it's so awesome too. Like, hearing, just for me as a volunteer, hearing there are 399 other
Yeah.
volunteers doing
Hmm.
what I'm doing, like, it makes me breathe a sigh of relief because I literally only have to quote give. I mean, I get more than I give. Let's be real.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, give an hour a week.
Yeah.
And so it makes that quote unquote lift on me so much easier, but then the impact isn't affected
Right.
because there are 399 other volunteers.
Yeah.
And I think that that's amazing. So I'm
Hmm.
going to get a little like personal and focus on you, Eugene.
Okay.
Were there any moments after you like decided we're going to move with intention, we're going to have, we're going to do the after school program, and then realizing like that's not the way to go, now we need to pivot? Were there any moments where that brought up emotions of fear or doubt in you? Like, were there any moments where you're just like, I can't do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be honest with you, probably from the get-go. I mean, from the start of it. I mean, it's like, here I am. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm working 2 jobs. It's like, number one, is this crazy to add something else onto my plate?
Right.
And then I can remember, just the other day I saw like the first YouTube video I made to try to get donors. I thought, I'm going to do this YouTube video and everybody's just going to, give me thousands of dollars, and crickets, nothing happened. No money, no money was. And so, yeah, it's like, is this, I know there's a need, but is this something that's going to grow? So, yeah, I mean, I think there was fears all along the way, but I think it was like seeing those and staying focused on those little wins and those little, man, I really made an impact in that student's life today, or they're starting to talk to me where they didn't talk to anybody. And it's like seeing those and saying, we need to keep going, Eugene. I know you're scared. I know it's hard. I know you're tired, but there is something here that's going to grow, and knowing in the back of my mind that it was important. And then, like I said, along the way, you're gathering people that are like-minded and want to see that mission grow with you. And so that starts to produce some momentum. And that's kind of how it happened. Just, people starting to say, these kids need this. We need to keep going, and pushing me even to keep going. Mm-hmm.
I think it's so important too, because I feel like everything you just described was an action. Even when you were like, I was telling myself
Yeah.
XYZ. And I can't remember what the quote is, but it's something like, fear can't exist in action.
Yeah.
And so anybody listening who is feeling afraid right now, like, that's just an energetic buildup.
Yep. Yeah.
Is push forward and do something action oriented to prove to yourself that you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think is like such an important thing for everybody to remember, including me. Let's be real.
Exactly.
So we've come to the final step of the AIM process, which is
Okay.
moving with intention. In that phase, what advice would you give the listener about taking the next intentional step?
I mean, like you said, if you have a passion and you have a direction, just stay the course. I mean, it's, that was the biggest thing with me. It's like, you're on this path, try not to get distracted and stay the course. I think that's the biggest thing that if it's really truly something that's in your heart, whether it's business, whether it's a nonprofit, whatever it is that you're chasing after, if it's something you really want to do, don't get distracted and stay the course and know that there's going to be sacrifices along the way. It's not going to be an easy ground to take, but if you want it bad enough, then you have to keep pushing forward. Yeah.
And in your experience, totally worth it?
Yes.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've impacted over 9,000 kids over the 10 years. So yeah, absolutely worth it.
Let's just take a minute and reflect on that, because you had 9,000 kids in your program.
Yeah.
But that is not the number of people impacted by the program, right?
It's all the volunteer mentors that have been impacted. It's the staff at the schools. Yeah, I mean, it's the communities.
It's the parents. It's the children of those children.
Yeah.
It's literally like I'm getting goosebumps at the idea of this ripple effect that, that number can't even be described.
It's way bigger than that when you think about it.
That's incredible.
It is. It's cool. It's really, it's a blessing to, to have stayed the course and to see the fruits of, because a lot of times I think people, they give up before they see the fruits of their labors. And it's cool to start really seeing the fruits of what myself and others have built here at Legacy. So it's been cool to see that.
That's amazing. It's amazing. And it all started with you and this one person's story.
Yeah.
And being brave enough to ask the question and then take steps to move forward. I think the thing that I am pulling from this conversation more than anything, which I'm a little bit surprised by, honestly, is this idea of like failing forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and failing quickly. I don't know if that would describe you, but as you're talking, I am constantly like, oh yeah, no, I can totally relate to that. Or, like trying to bring it into my own world. And I'm like one of those people who's like, go big or go home. So my failures look spectacular. And there are a lot of them because I move quickly.
Right.
And it sounds like you're the same way where you're like, well, that didn't work. Let's try this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I love it because it's like this idea that change doesn't require perfection.
Yeah.
Right? It requires presence. It requires us to show up and to be willing to fail forward and to be willing to like put our egos out there and maybe possibly get dinged a little, but remembering that like the mission is the most important thing. What you're actually doing in the world is important,
And being persistent, I think, is another good word. Because like you said, when you sit back and you're sitting on the outside and you think, man, we've impacted 9,000 kids. And if I would have just given up when the first, adverse thing happened, think about all the lives that may or may not have been touched and changed by, the mission and vision of the Legacy Project. So
I love it
so
so
when you
much.
put it in that perspective, it's like, it's pretty cool that I did this.
It's very cool, Eugene. It's very, very cool. And I think it's important with everything you just said about like having those adverse reactions. And I'm assuming those are from people, right? Mm-hmm. I always like to remember that when you're doing something like this, it's not about you.
Right.
Honestly, very little things in the world are about us, you guys.
Exactly. Yeah.
But like, within that framework, we have to remember too that like if somebody says no, it's not a personal attack. It just means that this might not be their thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's so important when people are trying to do something that is deeply personal to them and they see the change, 9,000 participants. It's insane.
Yeah.
And you would think like, why wouldn't everybody want to get on board with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we have to remember everybody has their own thing going on.
Yeah.
And it might not be the right time. It might not be the right cause. It might not be where their heart is being pulled to. We cannot let them
Yeah.
that stop us from finding the people who it is the right time.
Yeah.
Their heart is with us.
Yeah.
Like this is their cause. And so we just have to keep moving forward. And I think that's just such a great message in everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. If I would have given up every time I was told I was crazy or why are you doing this or no, I'm not gonna fund, none of this would have happened. So it's like, yeah, it's pushing back past the no's and the adversaries to stay on mission and know that, what you're doing is making a difference, whatever
totally.
that passion is in your life, and just keep pushing forward.
It's so interesting too, like a total sidebar right now with what you just said about people calling you crazy and like being like, I don't want to fund this. I feel like sometimes when people are triggered by a cause, right? Like you're trying to impact students, and there are a lot of people our age who needed a legacy project when we were growing up.
Exactly.
And they may be bitter.
Could be.
And so their reaction may very well be like, where were you when I was a kid, but I'm now an adult, so I'm going to tell you you're crazy.
Yeah. 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 I would think there's a lot of that too. Yeah.
Right. And I think like for the listeners and for everybody, like it's so important to remember people's reactions are from their experience, not what you're doing. And so that's really important. Anyway, that's my soapbox, Jenna. So Eugene, for someone who's listening, who feels deeply called to make a difference, but doesn't like know where to start, what do you want them to hear right now?
As it compared to with legacy or in life?
In life. Like if they have something like legacy that they're wanting to start.
I would say that like I said, that find someone maybe that has done it, or that has some experience, and bounce your ideas up. Don't just, like I said, we see so many people that see a need or have a passion, and then they just run after it with no idea of how they're going to get there. Find some people that you trust that can say, here's some next steps, or, I know there's a lot of people that can help you with business plans if that's what you're trying to start a business, or, there's people that'll help you get nonprofits started, or they might tell you, I know in Stark County where we're at, it's like there's a lot of foundations that are telling people, hey, there's way too many nonprofits. Don't start another nonprofit. Go find a place to serve with or in, or if you want to try to work from, whatever it is. So that would be my biggest thing is if you have a passion, if you have a desire for whatever, seek out some good people that can give you good advice on next steps, and be humble enough, because I think that's what we all run into. Well, this is my idea, and I'm gonna run after it no matter what. Be humble enough to say, you know what, there's already somebody over here that's doing this work in a great way, or there's this business that's already doing this. Find a way to go on mission with them if you have to, or hey, this is a need. Let me help you, run after it and make it happen.
I love it. That's amazing. Yes, I agree. And
Yeah.
looking back, what do you know now that you wish you knew when you were first starting?
Oh, man.
Sorry.
Probably, I probably the thing, I kept going, but probably to have a little bit of a glimpse of what it was going to look like now would have helped, if that makes sense.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, almost like, because there was a lot of sacrifice in there, and it's, yeah, I think that's probably, I don't know if that's, I know that's impossible, but to be able to visualize the way it looks now would have maybe helped.
Oh, that's
Had
so
an
interesting.
idea, but it's like, yeah.
So like the way that I would describe that for anybody who is listening would be like find an example in the world
Yeah, maybe
of
that.
what,
Yeah.
right? Of what
Yeah.
you want, because then it's possible.
Right.
And then the belief part comes in, is it possible for you?
Right. Yeah.
And
That's
where,
the perfect way to.
right? And you gotta be aggressively optimistic about the belief that it is a possibility for you.
Right.
For sure. And then I started the episode with the quote, every kid deserves to have someone in their corner. After all of this time working at Legacy Project, what does being in someone's corner mean to you today?
Man, I think the biggest thing for being in someone's corner is and I know you mentioned it like with your group. It's not necessarily going into these groups to try to fix these kids and their issues. It's being someone there that just wants to listen to them. They all have passions. They all have vision. They don't realize it yet sometimes, and I think that's part of what we do is help them to realize it, like you said with your group. But it's like sometimes we as adults and we think we got to go in and give all kinds of advice. Being present with these kids is just listening. It's just being there and saying, all right, I hear you and I can help you, but I hear you. And I think it's having that posture where I'm not coming in to fix you. I'm coming in to sit beside you, listen to you, and then, if I can, I'm going to help you find that path. I think that's the biggest thing. That's my passion for Legacy, and I think we do a good job of staying on that task. But that's the reason I started it was I really wanted to just have caring adults in there that are going to sit and listen to the hearts of these kids and try to give them hope, try to give them direction for that next step in life. Yeah.
I'm literally trying not to tear up because we're on camera. Eugene, I have to tell you, mission accomplished. And I'm not just saying that. Honestly, I didn't think that was going to be my experience necessarily when I volunteered. I just thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to get out of the house. I'm going to get to hang out with, kids and hopefully make an impact. But every single mentor I've had an interaction with, every day that I've gone into Legacy, the impact is so noticeable. Mm-hmm. And as I watch these kids go week after week after week, you can literally see their posture change. Yeah. You can see their confidence change. And I really do think that it's because they know they've got somebody in their corner, as you said. And so
yeah. And I don't know if I shared this with you, but I do a group of boys, and I think I did. I might have shared this with you, but
maybe
they're 5 young men, from coming from some pretty rough, traumatic lives, and we were talking about goals, and I asked them. I said, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And every one of those boys said, "Hopefully alive." So
God.
it's like those moments where you realize that we might be the only encouragement, hope that some of these kids have to say, hey, you know what, we want to see you alive in 5 years, and we want to see you being having hope and having direction and a pathway, and it all comes down to just listening, asking them questions, and hearing what they have to say.
I mean, 100%. And I think for the listeners, it's really important to point out that this is not inner city.
No, it's
this is not where you would think those responses would be coming from. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it goes back to what Eugene was saying earlier, which is you just never know what these kids are going through. Yeah, exactly. And they just need an adult to stop and listen and acknowledge and not belittle.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing. And that's impactful.
It is.
Yeah. It's mind blowing.
It is.
And I could talk about this all day long. Literally, this is so awesome. But we have to wrap it up because our listeners have
other lives to get to. Yeah.
Well, Eugene, thank you so much for coming on the show and giving us your story and telling us all about Legacy Project. It's just amazing. And I am so grateful to have found you and now to know you. And the work you do, it really does matter. And I just want to leave with this one thought for our listeners, because this is the truth I keep coming back to. And that is, change happens when someone decides to care enough to act.
Yeah.
And So if you're listening and you're feeling that nudge, or you're feeling like everything's out of control, which I know a lot of people are feeling right now, like find a place to volunteer. It doesn't have to be all on you.
Right.
You can join a group that already has the infrastructure, that already has the mission laid out. They're already doing it. I'm telling you from personal experience, it will change your life. You will not feel so hopeless. And it might just be the best part of your week. So go be in someone's corner. And I hope that today reminds you that you don't have to wait to be chosen. Possibility belongs to everyone.
Exactly.
And if this episode resonated with you, obviously, please take time to like it, share it, pass it on. Just like let people know that there are good people in the world like Eugene doing some amazing things, making an impact. All hope is not lost. And as we go on with our week, I want you to remember that, you know, life is full of possibilities, and it's up to us to identify which possibility we want to pursue and go at it with intention and don't give up. As Eugene, like, I feel like your whole message, Eugene, is don't give up.
Keep pushing.
Keep pushing. Keep pushing. And thank you for listening. I will see you next time here on the Aggressive Optimism podcast. I'm Jenna Edwards, and please like, follow, share, do all the things. Have a great week. Okay, bye.